Hey beautiful people, this video is about promises made and promises kept. And the reason why this is so important is I want to be able to take you inside, like deep inside, what really makes for high performance execution. And I want to look at the foundational elements of it. Now, as we talk through this, the foundational elements are going to look very elemental and very foundational, but I'm also going to help you start thinking about how that builds up to the sort of performance and execution and delivery and high functioning that you're looking for as you start thinking about the criticality of promises. I want to cover the difference between the teams that actually make promises versus the teams that simply delegate tasks, and help you understand the importance and the nature of that, what it looks like, and how to be able to recognize it, and how to be able to recognize the pros and cons. And then I want to look at the anatomy of a really good promise, because we all think of promises as something that we hear and also kind of something that we feel, but I'd really love to be able to give you a definition of it so we have a shared understanding together. I also want to look at what keeps promises from being kept. What gets in the way of promises being kept, so that when you recognize that someone is not able to keep promises to you, you have some tools to be able to think about it and maybe even resolve it. And then I want to introduce you and talk about how a promise-based systems really can transform project execution and team performance. So let's start off by talking about what is a promise. If I ask people what is a promise, they'll say someone saying they're going to do something, or someone saying they promise to do something, or it's a feeling I get that I have something I can rely on because someone has said that they were going to do it. And you know, you watch the sappy movies and there's a little kid who needs some kind of reassurance and their parents goes, "I promise everything will be okay." Inside my mind, I'm screaming at that and going, you can't do that. Nobody can promise everything is going to be okay. You can promise you're going to be there to try and help things be okay, but you can't promise everything's going to be okay. But they do that as a reassurance for the child. And many times we do that to each other. We give each other promises as a reassurance, not necessarily as a strict promise per se. So let's talk about what a promise is. It's really a coordinated action between two human beings. I am promising to do something for you. You are promising that you are going to do the dance of being the customer and being the supporter who's committed to being satisfied for the duration of the promise until I have delivered. When we think about a promise in this way as being a coordinated action between two parties, what it means is that we are creating a relationship between those two parties. The person who is the promisor, who is committing to deliver on the promise, and the person who is the requestor, which is the person who is asking for the promise. Now, if you think about it, and I use the shorthand of customer for the person who's requesting the promise and performer for the person who's delivering on the promise, but they could be promisor too. If you think about that and you think about work that gets done over a period of 3 months, let's say, that means that that customer needs to be engaged and involved in ensuring that the delivery is consistent with what it is that they have in their mind and maybe on a piece of paper, and certainly in conversation with their performer, as satisfaction for them. How are we going to know when it's done, and how are we going to know when it's satisfactory? And there are two different things, and I'll talk about those in more detail in another video. But the interesting thing to think about here is when we think about customer and performer, it pushes us to start thinking about promises and commitments very, very differently. Because in our current work environment, I might be the person who is the team lead, and I might have 200 tasks that I am responsible for. And I might have 20 people who are working on my team who are delivering on those tasks. But there's no real contract between us in terms of making sure that the environment and the structure and the circumstances are visited and paid attention to for the duration of that work being done. It's kind of assumed that's going to happen, but many times, particularly in projects today where they're highly complex and very fast moving, is someone might make a promise in month 1, and by month 3 the tangent of the project is headed off in a different direction, and what they've promised to do isn't aligned with the work that was originally planned for. If we allow people to kind of go off track like that, not that they're going off track, they're on the original track, the project's headed in a slightly different direction, is they will end up being frustrated and disenfranchised and disengaged, and it'll destroy trust with them. If instead we have a relationship where the customer is having ongoing conversations with them, understanding changes of context that the junior person may not see, the team lead might actually have a better understanding of, and that those are ongoing conversations specifically related to that promise, what we're doing is we're empowering someone to be a hell of a lot smarter than if we're just lobbing something over to the wall to them and having that disconnected from the overall context and expecting them to be able to deliver on it by kind of guessing what's going on and going to team briefings that talk about the trajectory of the project moving slightly differently than what we'd originally planned, and expecting them to be able to make that translation and extrapolation from there. The other thing about a promise is that a customer can make a request, or the performer, the promisor, can actually make an offer to promise. So if you think about that in terms of the loop that I've introduced in a number of other videos, and you can see a copy of it here, what that does is it opens up a conversation for people to be able to not just have ideas, but to be able to create a proposal to bring those ideas to fruition. I worked for this fantastic boss at one point. He was actually a client, and he had a big poster up on his cubicle, because in those days we were doing open cubicles, and it said "no whining." And it was a whining with a stop sign, no whining. And what it did was it meant that he was basically saying, don't come into my office and tell me all the things that are wrong unless you're thinking about how we can begin to solve some of them. And not by telling other people how they should solve them, but how you can drive solving them. He was effectively saying, if you're going to come into my office, come in with an offer that will allow us to be able to move things forward powerfully and effectively. The other thing about promises is that there's an explicit declaration of satisfaction and completion. Now, many times, because we're working in this stream of constant tasks, we'll do a task and we'll check the code back in if we're doing software development, or we'll check it into a library, or we'll check a box to say that it's done on a project plan, and we'll keep on about the next thing that's on our list. And what we are missing out in there is we're missing out the opportunity to really be able to provide a level of calibration with each other. Now, I'm not saying that we have to do this for every single task that we're doing on a project. And I'll talk about the fact that I don't think that we should be doing tasks at that level anyway, but that's another video. But we can't do that for every single task on a project, and I wouldn't expect you to, but I would absolutely expect customers who have recurring performers to have those conversations with them around particular work on an ongoing basis, where they are learning how to create that level of refinement and calibration around what it is that we're doing. If we understand what a promise really is and we start practicing that as a foundational element of our projects, we'll start shifting how projects get executed, how teams function, how people relate to each other, how people make real commitments to each other, and how people build trust with each other. I consider this conversation, this idea of promises, to be an absolutely foundational element of high-functioning teams, and I've seen it consistently be the foundation for creating and delivering and allowing high-functioning teams to deliver amazing results. So it sounds like something incredibly simple, but it is something very complex and very powerful. The beauty about it is it's really simple to be able to see and to preliminarily understand. It's very complex to put into practice, but because people can see it and go, oh, I get what this is, I want to go out and practice it, their willingness to be able to practice this puts them into that complex change that needs to happen and enables them to be able to build shared language around it together so that they can learn much faster together. I've implemented this thinking in a number of high-functioning teams, and the results have been fun and fabulous. Not just the business results, which are terribly important, but also the personal, individual results where people really get to engage with each other as human beings with deep respect and deep appreciation because they're making real promises to each other and they're building real trust. If that's the sort of team that you want to be on, that you want to build, that you want to start functioning as, then I encourage you to look at the other high functioning teams videos that I've done. And also I have a white paper that I think will help you with this thinking, help you see kind of what it looks like to execute in this way. And it is called Execution by Design. There's a link down in the comments below, and it's also available on my website, which is www.jenniferkenny.com/execution. Read it. Let me know what you think about it. I'd love to get a conversation started with you about how you're thinking about this and how you're going to begin to apply it. And I wish you the best of luck with it, because if you get to work in an environment where people are really able to make real promises to each other, it makes for a level of appreciation and empowerment and joy that is really rare to have on a team, and something that I would absolutely love for everyone to experience and enjoy. I wish you the best of luck. Take care.